Hello and welcome to the 5th series of Forthright,
the podcast with, for and by women writers.
If you enjoy the show, please give us a follow and a review wherever you listen to your podcasts.
We've got some fantastic writers for you coming up. We hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to the Forthright podcast. I'm Anna.
And I'm Sam. And today we're absolutely delighted to have Amita Murray with us. Hi, Amita.
Hi, Anna and Sam. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Amita's Unladylike series of Regency novels are published with Harper Collins. She's won the Exeter Novel Prize and the SI Leeds Literary Prize, been a writer in residence with Leverhulme Literary Works, Spread the Word, University College London, Plymouth University and others. She's taught creative writing in world-renowned University of East Anglia programme, and her writing appears in magazines such as Red, New Scientist, Big Issue, Bookseller, Writer's Digest, Diva, Ellery Queen, Wasafiri and more.
Wow, and today we're delighted because Amita is going to be reading from An Unladylike Secret, and I'm just going to introduce the blurb. He's a rogue, she's a liar, together they're scandalous. Myra Marley hides behind a pen name to write scandalous stories about lords and ladies of society at the court of Queen Charlotte. Her world is turned upside down when an outrageous circular she writes sends Regency book Finnegan Underwood on the run for murder. As Myra heads to the Devon coast in search of the real culprit, she finds herself caught in a den of ruffians and scoundrels, not least Finnegan himself. Now turned smuggler, he's proving to be one lawbreaker who is very hard to resist. Can Myra keep her head, her heart, in her quest for the truth? Oh, brilliant. So would you mind just explaining which part of the book you're going to be reading, and just for context before you read the extract?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So the book is An Unladylike Secret, just like you said. And this is, while it's the third book in a series, if you think about it, a bit similar to the way Bridgerton is set up, where each book focuses on one sibling of a family, then you'll kind of get an idea that they can be read as standalone as well. So I just wanted to give that as context first. And then I'm going to read actually the very beginning so that you are introduced to Myra, as a reader would be.
Fab.
Great. Okay, so An Unladylike Secret, Chapter 1. Myra's soul was leaking out to the open sea, into a world of shifting blues and greens and purples and colours for which she had no name. The sea wasn't calm. It was writhing, a hungry monster lashing inside its belly, a keening wind pulling and slamming at the waves. Like calling to like. Down here in Devonshire, it was impossible not to answer the call. The Myra wasn't sure if the call was out there in the ocean or inside her. The tug of the open blue scared her. It was one thing to stand on the shingle and watch the thrashing waters, but to get inside, be submerged. Myra shivered. No. The water held too many terrifying memories. It was safer to admire it from a distance. It had taken 4 days to get from London to the south coast. Myra and her friend Ursula had stopped to rest and to give Ursula time to see, describe, and draw every single plant she saw on the journey. They had made one more stop when a sudden blind panic swept over Myra, and she halted the carriage and tumbled out, gasping for breath. She had stood by the side of the road, wondering if she would always feel like this now, if the panic in her belly would ever go away. Just last week, the sound of someone singing at the theatre had brought it on, and she had rushed out into the night, clutching the silver hairpin she wore in her hair. A mini dagger, its head a carving of Kali with her tongue sticking out. The only thing Myra had of her mother's from India. Myra often thought that India had slipped away from her. Not only had the picture of the country become fuzzy over the years, but she couldn't even locate it within herself. She couldn't find the child she had been when she lived there. She had held a hairpin close to her until the dread passed. Ursula had looked intensely surprised, as if Mira was turning into a completely different person. Mira was terrified that the facade she had built so carefully of a sensible, steady woman was crumbling, and everyone would see the yearning and fears that stormed inside her. She turned for a second to look at the Globe Inn where they had rooms. It was a large white building hung with baskets of flowers, and it looked like it had given up the fight to keep out the sand and chaos about a century ago. Carriages stopped there all day for a lightning-quick change of horses. Stagecoaches arrived, crammed with passengers. And the proprietor had told them that the kitchens fried 3,000 sausages every day and got through a good few casks of brandy. Mira breathed in the salt air. London was not the ugliest place in the world, even with the constant building works and the murky fog. But this, the south coast, was something else. The red cliffs rose all the way in front of her, as if the sea had given birth to them. Velvet hills sloped into the distance. Starbursts of stonecrop poked through the rocky crevices, and the fleshy leaves of the sea sparrow, Ursula had pointed it out, danced naked in the breeze. She sneaked a look all around and decided not to bother with a female companion. Out here, who would care? And anyway, they already thought she was an eccentric spinster from the city. She set off along the coastal path. Somewhere in front of her, the red cliffs made a cove. The hotel proprietor, Irma Ponsonby, had warned her to keep away from it. I wouldn't wander that way alone if I were you, Miss Marley. However free and easy you are in the city, even you might not be a match for the local smugglers, she had said, her crimped grey curls a woolly frame for her thin face. You don't think I can handle a smuggler or two, Mrs. Ponsonby? Mira had asked. What if their passions run away with them at the sight of a woman, Miss Marley? Miss Ponsonby had shuddered. Mira had placed her napkin on her lap. I'm too old and prosaic for a man's passions to run away with him at the mere sight of me. A pause. Then Mrs. Ponsonby said, Reckon that's true. Ursula said, Yes, my dear, you'll be fine. Mira had looked indignantly at them. Was she so old and prosaic? Some of them don't wear shirts, Mrs. Ponsonby had announced on her way out of the parlour. Ursula had murmured, maybe I will come with you. I'll stop there.
Oh, brilliant. So, like you said kind of in your introduction that this book is part of a series. So this is the third one, isn't it? So I was just wondering like where the idea for these books came from.
The idea, okay, so my favourite Regency author, the one that I kind of grew up reading and who's my comfort food is Georgette Hare. Mm-hmm. And Georgette Hare, you know, like all Regency writers, I mean, she's the queen to me. Like, you know, of course, Jane Austen, but is the ultimate sort of Regency writer because she was actually writing during the Regency. But Georgette Hare was writing about 100 years later, but her writing was set in the Regency. Mm. And so the early 1800s. And I love that time period. And what I wanted was to explore, for one thing, a female writer, because then I can kind of write about my writing process, my need to write, my craving to write, and I can put all of that into a character. But I love the South Coast, and I love Devon, and I love all the beautiful kind of, you know, of course the sea, but the Jurassic Coast and the Red Cliffs and all of that. And there's great history there because there's history of smugglers who used to bring liquor over from France when it was illegal to do so. And so there's all this kind of, you know, cool history with smugglers, and there's history of, you know, people bringing in brandy in the middle of the night into a cove and then having to be transported on donkeys or, you know, to the nearest inn. And so I wanted to explore all of that in this kind of non-London setting where we can have slightly more interesting, you know, than the tea room and the ballroom. We can have some smugglers and we can have beaches and we can have romance on the beach. So yeah, that was kind of my draw to this story.
I think it's wonderful and it's so evocative. And also, as you were saying as well, that each one of the three books is a standalone in its own right. When you first came up with the idea, did you always know it was going to be part of a trilogy or, three-part books? Or did you write the first and then that led to the second? And also the second part of that question is, when it was pitched to a publisher, was it pitched as 3 books or was it 1 and then that led to 3?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because these things are a little bit organic. I have to say that by the time I'd written the first, it was very clear that there were 3 sisters and that there would be a story about each. And then I did have to think a little bit ahead because I mentioned for the first sister, in the first book, I do mention the other 2 sisters and they make a short appearance. And so I did have to really make up my mind what professions the other 2 were going to have. So the first one owns like a social salon where she hosts social evenings. So she hosts that, and that's her profession. But the second sister, Anya, she is a singer in Queen Charlotte's court. And the third one, Mira, like we just saw, is a writer. So I had to kind of make sure that I wanted the second to be a singer and the third to be a writer. I didn't want to then go, oh, shoot, why did I make them those things? Now I have to write about them. So that was my only little qualm when I was writing. Like, I really needed to nail their personalities and the short scenes in which they appear. And I did that. But it was very clear that it was definitely going to be 3 books at first. And it was pitched that way. And in fact, the bidding war that happened for the books was always for 3 books.
That's very exciting.
Yes, a bidding war. That sounds brilliant.
I know. A bidding skirmish, let's just say, at least.
A bidding fist fight.
Yes, a bidding wrestling match, exactly. Exactly.
The Marley sisters are, brilliant characters. And then, so you were saying, obviously, you kind of had an idea about them while you were writing it's Unladylike Lessons in Love is the first one, right?
Yeah.
So while you had Leela was quite established, probably in your head during the writing of that, could you tell us a bit more about then how the other 2 kind of formed more from just sort of, their professions?
Yeah, thanks. You're such good questions and so thoughtful. So thank you for doing that and taking the time. I have to say, so it's funny because we all, the trick with all characters that you make are, as we always say, that they're always a part of the author. Like there's some part of you, the author, in each of your main characters. And I think that's true. So for Leela, she hosts these salons and she's a very good hostess. And so she always feels like she's very animated and chirpy and kind of intense, but then there's a private side of her and a vulnerable side of her that no one gets to see. And that was very much me. So that was the one thing that I really wanted to see in her, that she does this thing of putting on a kind of a fun animated act where her vulnerabilities are hidden away and only very few people get to see them, if anyone. So that was very clear to me about Leela. But then the other 2 have different characteristics about me, I suppose. The second one, Anya, who's one of, maybe possibly that's my favorite out of the 3 books. Anya, to me, is her music is everything to her. So Leela for her, the salons are a profession, but for Anya, music is a calling, and she loses herself in it, and the things that make her uncomfortable about the world, she feels like she can hide that within her music, and she can kind of channel it into her music. So once that became clear to me, her whole personality kind of emerged from that one thing. She's very strong within herself in the sense of kind of having her music as a calling. But she also thinks that no one else in her life will really look out for her. Like, she will have to do things for herself, that all her longings will just be longings and they will just be in her head. And then she meets someone and they have quite a lot of banter and a lot of chemistry and they really kind of annoy each other as well, and her and Damien. But then this core of her that no one will look out for her, and then Damien really looks out for her and is protective of her. that completely takes her by surprise. So that again kind of emerged as I started writing about the two of them. And then Mira is a different character because Mira is the kind of person who no one realizes she's a writer. No one knows, because in those days you'd have a male pen name many times if you were writing as a woman. So no one really knows that it's her, and she kind of keeps herself very, very almost sort of sedate and passionless when she's in society, but then she's actually a very passionate woman when she's within herself. So again, all of them have these elements of what they hide and what they show. I think as all of us do, perhaps, and we have our acts, and then we also have our private side. That's the more vulnerable side. So I wanted each hero to be the kind of person who can draw out that vulnerable side from each of the heroines and be able to be protective of that side. Yeah, so that's how they each kind of emerged as different people, but yet I could connect, myself with something in them. But yeah, it was organic. I'm a very organic writer. I'm not a plotter. And so, I do tend to kind of have a spark of an idea about a character, and then I have a spark of an idea about their partner or their love interest, and then their chemistry really determines, their character, and their character determines their chemistry, and that's what determines the plot. So I'm not a plotter at all.
That's really interesting as well, because I think that when you're getting to know your characters while you're writing them as well, there's a real freshness to it, and I think that really comes through with the way that you write as well. There's and I've kind of wondered, they are such well-rounded characters, fully formed characters, and obviously, when you're working, when you're teaching creative writing, you're working with students and feedbacking to them about their work. But when you're writing your own work, do you have an inner circle of people that you share with, or how do you sense check your work with others before it goes to your agent or your publisher?
Yeah, a good question again. Yes, I mean, when I'm working with other people, I always say to them, character is everything, and you have to kind of, when you've hit the kind of the magic button, because you stop writing from the outside of the character as if you're looking down at them, and you start writing from the inside of a character as if you're in them and you are them, and they're dictating the story. So that's what I say to other people. But you're exactly right that in a way, I'm the queen of kind of hitting the send button before I should. And, I tend to go, I've written it and I enjoyed it so much, it must be good. And here it goes. And it's not what I advise anyone to do. It's just the wrong thing to do. When you first finished writing something, a story, an article, a book, it's just got things that you cannot see because you're so in it. And you enjoyed it, hopefully, enjoyed the writing of it. And you just cannot see the problems. And you just think, it's the best thing I could have ever written. It's going to win all the awards. It has to just go right now. I'm too impatient to wait. And so I have a few things I tend to do. One is I write way ahead of deadlines, because I hate deadlines. I can't handle them. I don't like the feeling of writing to a deadline. And many people love it, by the way. But I hate it because I feel then that I'm now pressured to tell a story versus feeling my way through it, which is the way I like to do it. So I tend to write way ahead of deadlines. What that means is, though, that by the time the deadline comes around and someone says, I now need your manuscript, I've now had time to read it back to myself and go and make the changes I want to. And then my sister is very good at being my first reader, and she then reads through it and then she gives me a bit of feedback. Then when I've done whatever she has said, and I've kind of made a few changes, that's when then it goes to my agent, and then my agent might say, actually, just do a little bit here and there. And then it goes to the editor. So there are kind of checks and balances, but I do think the biggest key is not necessarily having people to look at the work, but it's actually that gap that you give before, after finishing and before sending. And that key, and I'm so bad at it because I'm so impatient.
I love that it's your sister, that your sister's your first reader.
She's great. She's read everything, but she's very kind, and that can be a problem because she doesn't want to criticize too much, and so that can be a little bit of a thing. But like sisters, obviously I'm writing about sisters as well, and Anisha is just like she's my first reader, and she's very she will tell me a few things that that like just here there's a scene that needs developing, or we've rushed past here, but then she hesitates when there's something really wrong with it, and then doesn't always say. But that does mean that there's some reassurance before I send it to my agent.
So does that mean you don't really do very much editing at all? It's kind of like you've done your first. You're rushed through to one where you're excited to get to the end, and then your sister looks at it, and then you kind of make those changes. Do you feel like you don't really do much other editing?
No, I actually do quite a lot. But the reason I say that the first draft is over is I edit quite a lot along the way, which is I know the thing that we say not to do, and we say just thrash out a first draft and then give it a break and then go back. I actually do quite a lot of editing as I go. So my first, I'd say between 10 and 30,000 words. So say a novel is about 90 to 100. The first 10 to about 20, 30,000, I'm still trying to figure out my characters because I, at that time, just need them to be people that I believe in and that people who are convincing as real people and that they have a chemistry. So at that time, I'm actually going back and forth so much and I'm deleting stuff and I'm going, I don't like this and this is, and my instincts are telling me it's not working. Something's not right with the character. So I actually go back and forth a lot in that time. So that's kind of my slowest period in that sense. Then once I feel comfortable in that I've nailed the characters, and the characters do the rest of the work in a way, they tell the story. But even then, every day, so when I'm working on a project, I do tend to write every day, whereas between projects I take time off. But when I'm writing every day, the first thing I actually do is read back what I've done the previous day and I edit it. Then sometimes the next day I might still go back even over stuff that I've already looked at. So it depends. Sometimes I just have an instinct of like, oh, up to here, I've actually edited pretty well, but the last X thousand words need more. So I do go back and forth all the time. So by the time I've completed a draft, and then towards the end, I've rushed because I'm at that time, I just want to get the story out. So for the last 30,000, I tend to have usually rushed. And so at that time, then I know that last 30,000 needs more work. So I edit that. So that's my first draft is something that happens after all of that writing and editing has already taken place. So in that sense, then when I do a really clean edit before sending to my agent, that's usually a few months later when I've had a bit of a gap.
That sounds extremely sensible.
And now I have learnt the hard way. I've learnt the hard way over time that I need to do it this way, and this process works for me.
So you were saying that you like to get your first draft in well before deadline, and that you write every day when you're in the midst of a project. How do you plan that writing time in your day, and what does a successful writing day look like for you? Is it the amount of hours you've sat in front of your computer, or is it a word count or a chapter? How do you plan all of that?
Yeah. So, of course, like most authors, I mean, the thing is, I do work in an academic setting as well, and there also I work with writing and writers and sort of using creative writing in our artistic work or in our academic work. So I do that alongside writing because it fits quite nicely, and it means I have a team of people to work with instead of sitting by myself and becoming a bit Scrooge-like when I'm writing, and a bit sort of grumpy, quite grumpy actually. People would say. So let's just be honest. So I think getting out of that and into the job world, to me, just gives me a team of people where we're all fighting towards the same thing, and I quite cherish that. So I don't want to lose that. So that does mean though that the writing time that I have becomes a bit more precious, and having a family and all this, all of that. And friends are important too. And so I do make sure that, that the social side of me is also getting what it needs, because I am very restless and I do need that kind of close friendships and deep relationships with people. So I tend to kind of try and honor that. And that does mean, though, that I will have sort of a limited amount of time to actually do the writing, which sounds a bit crazy, but I'm a very fast writer. So when I'm in the thick of a project, I could say that I've had a kind of a full day. I'll make sure that I get an hour or two. Sometimes it's just an hour of writing, but because I'm doing it every single day, there's no time. I don't need any time to backtrack and kind of go, where was I? What do I need here? I'm so in the thick of it that actually, because I'm doing it every day, I wake up with stuff kind of already bubbling in my head that just needs to be put down. So if I, however, gave it loads of time in between, then it would be a problem, because then I'd spend hours just kind of going, where was I? And where, what was happening in the story. But whereas now, if I just get an hour, and because I'm doing it every day, I can write a couple of thousand words in that hour. And then sometimes at the weekend, then I'll have longer, sort of more hours to do it. And then I will produce quite a lot. But I'm quite fast when I'm doing it this way. So I kind of plan I tell myself that when I'm in the thick of a project, I will do at least 1,000 words per day. And then I forgive myself when I can't get to that. And there are days when I am so in the thick of the writing and it's so fast and flowing that I can do more, even in a shorter amount of time. So, I just think that what it needs is a hunger. I'm hungry to write and desperate to write, and it's where I feel, relatively speaking, normal. So it's my safe space, and once I enter it, it gives me lots of focus and lots back. So it's not just me giving something to it. So I think that's the thing. I think just kind of keeping on reminding ourselves why we write is really important. Yeah.
Where does research sit within your process? Because obviously writing in a different time period, there might be things that you don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the stuff, first thing is, I think that many Regency writers especially are so influenced by either Austen or Georgia Tare, or both, that the world that we make is influenced by those two writers especially, but then obviously there's contemporary writers like Julia Quinn, and a few others who who kind of influence what we think of the Regency. So there's that. But then there's lots of there's loads of websites and books that will tell you Austen's world and Austen's what clothes people wore at that time and all of this kind of stuff. So you can get quite a lot of that quite easily, like what people were wearing and what their pastimes were, and what they might do in an evening. I tend to like being a little bit outside the box. So, for example, you'll see loads of authors have written about balls and soirees and musical evenings, and I do touch on those things, but then I always like to give a little bit something different. And so in the first book, this sounds gross, but I don't describe it too graphically, but there are rat pits where people, especially in Victorian times, but also going back to the Regency, where you'd get people betting on how many rats their dog could kill. It sounds really.
It was quite I do remember that scene feeling quite squeamish about even the idea of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I skim past the gory details. I'll tell you that. We just go into the scene and then we know it's happening, but we don't really see it too much. So there is.
I think it was just the idea of it, because I'd not. It wasn't something I'd kind of known about. It was like,
thankfully,
yeah, exactly. And I like that edgier side of the Regency. I like the edgier bits, and I like to keep things a little bit spicy and edgy. So it becomes a bit sort of twee in a way if you're just in ballrooms all the time. And I didn't want that, and I wanted working classes to be represented. What do working classes do? Not that they were called the working class at the time, but lower socioeconomic groups. Like, what did they do to pass the time? What was their entertainment? And I think that's really important, and many times that's missed by Regency writers, especially tend to stay in ballrooms and wealthier people. And so I do like that kind of edgier side. Smugglers in the third book. There's a scene in kind of in a tavern in Whitechapel in the first book. There's a highwayman in the second book. So there's all these. I like to kind of explore kind of the edgier sides, and I think that sometimes needs a bit of research, because I need to go, well, what might be pastimes, or what are the taverns that someone who's working class might go to? What might it look like? So I do kind of research around that, and then I'm also trying to draw in colonial histories and histories of the slave trade, and that requires research, like what exactly was going on at what time, what year was abolition in. But then at the same time, things like when was Queen Charlotte's birthday, drawing room, all of these things are actually historically accurate. So I try and make sure that my dates are kind of right, and I know what's going on in the world around that. But then I do get things wrong as well. So I just read the excerpt where I'd said that it took them 4 days to get from London to somewhere like Exeter in Devon. And when I'd written the book, I had not calculated 4 days. I'd calculated less than that. But unfortunately, in this book, there's a murder that takes place, which then I had to go back and change every darn time. I'd said, the murder the next day. It was actually the murder the 4 days later, and so it was just I had to kind of go and backtrack and kind of do that for every time I had said, yesterday the murder took place. It was 4 days ago the murder took place. So I had to change quite a few things. So it those historical details can be quite interesting, because we're so used to traveling at a different pace, and having hotels and having kind of conveniences that obviously weren't there at that time.
I think the extensive research around these kind of things, however laborious it must be at the time, certainly makes for a much richer story as well. All those details, and I guess it only takes one person who appears to know a lot about that era to write the letter or send the email to say, actually it's 4 days, not 1 day.
Yeah. And copy editors, the copy editors are brilliant, because they check all this and they'll tell you, and they'll say, well, this word wasn't in use at that time. You want to still use it, and they'll say things like that. And this person who you've mentioned, because I wanted somehow to acknowledge Jane Austen, and I tried to do that, and then of course my copy editor was like, well, at that time people wouldn't have called her that, and it's just prior to her success. And so I had to then go, okay, how can I somehow reference Austen? And so I actually then mentioned a different author that Jane Austen was quite inspired by. So I went kind of that way about it. But, there are things that a copy editor, editors are just worth their weight in gold. They'll just tell you, actually, this can't be done in this amount of time. And so you are in safe hands in that way.
I can't believe that we've kind of got to the end of our time with you.
We've just checked the time. We're like, how can it have been 30 minutes already? We could have carried on talking to you for another hour. Thank you so much. Could we ask then, if you had a piece of advice for a writer who is starting out, or somebody who wanted to break into writing fiction, what would your piece of advice you'd give to them, or your younger self as a writer potentially?
Okay, we'll do. And I just also wanted to thank you both, because you've just been great to chat to, and the time has really flown by. And thank you for that. And it's just been lovely, and just so thoughtful the way that you looked at the books as well. Okay, so there's a lot, because I think it's a very, for some reason, anxious process. It just is, and it makes people really impatient, and people kind of start counting their rejections on Twitter and all this kind of stuff. And I feel like you kind of, this is hard because I'm very impatient, but what I would say is that, have other things in your life that enrich it, because enrich your life, not just your writing, because it is a slow, laborious thing. It's the publishing industry is extremely slow. It's a slow beast, and so things will take a very long time. And if you are just sitting there kind of refreshing the page and counting your rejections and counting the non-responses, it's just quite soul destroying in many ways. And it's actually better to kind of keep hold of, other things that you love doing, whether it's a part-time job or it's your family or it's your friends or it's your social life. Don't completely give all of that up. Causes that you're interested in, because one of the things that you have to realize when you go into this industry is that it's so slow, and things don't happen at the pace that you want, and things don't happen to the people that you want them to happen to, and things don't happen to the books that you want them to happen to. So it's a very slow, very profit driven industry, and you kind of have to just take that as it is if you really want to enter it.
Fabulous advice. So for listeners who would like to hear more from you, I know you've got Instagram and so on, and you've got a very fabulous Substack also. So if you tell us your handles for those.
Yes, of course. Thank you. Amita Murray for basically everything. So what used to be Twitter is X, and I'm not very active on it anymore. So if you contact me on there and I don't respond, it's because I am not there very much anymore. But Instagram, Amita Murray. So please do contact me. I will get back to you. And for the Substack, thank you for mentioning that. It's called Creative Hunger. And I don't know what I talk about. So I talk a lot about charity shops and my clothes that I've got from charity shops, because I love doing that. And so I do talk about that, but I also talk about slightly deeper things. Like, for example, I spent a lot of the last 2 months just crying, like at random times. I'm watching something, I'm crying. I'm in a poetry workshop, I'm crying. And I'm in a Teams meeting and crying. So I did do quite a lot of quite therapeutic, quite healing crying in a way that was very unfamiliar to me, because I'm much more of a cry into my pillow kind of person rather than crying in front of people. So I will write about random things like that, because I feel like so many people, can connect, and it's healing for me too. So yes, please do join me on Substack. It's totally free, and it's called Creative Hunger.
Fab. Thank you so much. And we'll certainly be following your Substack, just purely because we're both massive charity shoppers as well. Yes. So,
yeah. Oh, okay. Right. Just ask me where, for London ones especially, but also outside of London. I'm such a charity shop monster. I love them so much. That is really how I do all my, get my kind of shopping hunger out, because I do love shopping, and I don't like doing it on the high street. And I love doing it in quirky charity shops.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending some time with us, and yes, your generosity of spirit and sharing some wonderful, wonderful pearls of wisdom as well. We've really, really loved talking to you.
Thank you, Anna and Sam. Thank you so much. You were both really lovely to talk to.
Thank you for listening.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell your writer friends about us.